Good morning and welcome to The Skinny for Friday, January 9th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix, joined by my colleague Ray Roa, the editor-in-chief with Creative Loafing. Ray, good morning. This is going to be my last in-studio appearance for a bit because I'll be going to Tallahassee next week for the legislative session. It's Ron DeSantis' last stand, as it were. We'll be there for that. And so I will not be here physically for a couple of months.
Yeah, March 13th, you don't come back.
That's right. But hopefully there'll be other opportunities to come here. And we're going to talk. We're going to really get into the session here on our show today. And by the way, before we leave, though, I know that you're going to be involved with this comedy improv thing tonight. And I want to talk about that before we get out today. So we definitely have to talk about that. We're going to leave some time at the end of the show. Okay. So, but yes, as I just mentioned, so the Tallahassee next Tuesday is the opening day of the 60-day legislative session, scheduled to run for 60 days. Of course, we know last year it went way beyond that. I believe there's over 1,000 bills that have been filed so far. Maybe that's not true. Maybe it's just several hundred. But nevertheless, there'll be substantially fewer that actually get discussed and even fewer that will actually pass. And later on the show, we're going to talk to some advocates about specific bills they are looking at in this session. But we're going to talk to a couple of reporters right now for the first part of the show about what they're looking at in terms of the 2026 legislative session. Right now, we've got in studio McKenna Schuler. She is, of course, with the Orlando Weekly. McKenna is a former WMNF and Creative Loafing reporter, and you can read her reports at Creative Loafing. McKenna, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here.
Thanks for making the drive over here.
Yes, absolutely, on I-4. And then also joining us via Zoom from the Capitol is one of the best young reporters covering state politics and government. And also, as of the last few months, my colleague at the Florida Phoenix, Liv Caputo. Liv, good morning.
Hey, Mitch. Good morning. How are you?
Great to have you here with us, Liv. Thank you so much. And let me start with you, Liv, if we could. And that is, you cover this very intensely, as all of us do at the Phoenix here, all the goings on in the Capitol. What are you really looking at this year coming up, which starts on Tuesday, in terms of specific bills or issues that are going to be discussed?
There's a few main topics that I'm really looking at ahead of the session. First of all is the one that the governor's really been harping on is AI. We're seeing all sorts of different AI legislation starting to pour in, specifically stemming from his proposed AI Bill of Rights. So I'm kind of looking at stuff dealing with bills that are restricting maybe AI data centers in the state of Florida, bills that are restricting AI chatbot companions. Those are some of the main ones that I'm starting to see. Even I'm trying to think of one other. It's a bill that would ban governments from contracting with foreign companies that use AI. So that's one main area I'm looking at. I'm looking at a lot of immigration stuff. We're seeing bills that are mandating E-Verify use for all businesses, bills that are allowing for families to sue if their loved one was killed by an undocumented immigrant. There's a lot of stuff going on, in short, that I'm looking at.
Yeah, and when we pick up on that, on immigration, because I know that's one of your beats, and actually I know the governor had a press conference at one of the detention facilities known as, quote, Deportation Depot earlier this week that you attended. What was the big news out of that event?
Big news out of that one was that Florida had partnered with federal authorities they said they had arrested over 10,000 migrants illegally in the state. They said 63% of those arrested had previous criminal charges. This kind of expanded on a past operation called Operation Tidal Wave that we saw in late April, early May, where it was the largest in the nation because it was 1,000 migrants illegally in the nation had been captured. This time it was 10,000. And that was the big news. There was that. The other news, too, was it was the first time the governor commented on the capture of Nicolas Maduro. He was very supportive of the capture. So we kind of had a twofold news day at Deportation Depot.
Right. And he's also hinted that Attorney General James Othmeyer may prosecute Maduro himself, or the state might. So we'll wait and see about that. McKenna Schuler, good morning. McKenna, what are you looking at as the session begins next week?
Yeah, so as usual, I'm kind of keeping my eye on different bills affecting workers' rights and labor issues, as well as immigration policy and preemption and affordability issues as well. But as far as the labor-related bills, there's a few proposals that came up last year that maybe made some movement, but have popped up again this year. not surprisingly. So, for instance, there's a proposal affecting minimum wage requirements. So essentially creating a loophole to allow employers to pay certain types of entry-level workers, including interns, pre-apprentices, apprentices, and work-study participants less than the state minimum wage for up to 9 months. That's if they voluntarily sign paperwork opting out of the state minimum wage, which when this came up last session, opponents brought up that this could essentially allow, or this would open up the opportunity for exploitation of young workers, vulnerable and other desperate workers that want a job, but maybe their employer tells them, if you opt out of the state minimum wage, then I will hire you or I will keep you on. So there were concerns about that, and especially with young workers. There are certain guardrails in this new proposal filed this year that weren't there last year, such as if the worker is a minor, then requiring parental consent as well. So the parent has to be okay with their child being paid less than the state minimum wage. There's another bill that came up that's already made some movement that hasn't gotten a lot of attention, but would essentially just kind of tighten eligibility requirements for getting unemployment benefits or reemployment assistance, as it's called in Florida. We know this state's one of the hardest in the country when it comes to applying for benefits and actually how much money you get in unemployment. Yeah, so I think it has one of the lowest benefits amounts in the nation, so up to a maximum of $275 a week, which really is not enough in a state like Florida or maybe anywhere in the country at this point. What about child labor? We know we've seen those bills proposed the last couple of sessions that I don't believe got through all the way. Is that accurate? Or in 2023 it did, but 2024 I think. I believe, but last year there was another set of bills that was filed that did not make it through, and I haven't seen them refiled. I mean, there's still the rest of today. Of course, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there will be many bills still filed before 6 o'clock today on that. Okay, so let's talk about some other issues here. Property taxes, right? We know that this is going to be this is like. It's so interesting because DeSantis and Chief Financial Officer Blaise Ingoglia have been on the campaign trail. That's all you can say, for months, pushing this thing through. Liv, let's bring you back on this. And that is, yet we don't really know. I believe there was originally 8 proposals. 7 of them would be constitutional amendments or resolutions is how they file them as. 4, I believe, have advanced to, where we're at right now. I looked at this yesterday. Kevin Steele, who's running for CFO against Blaise Ingoglia, he has one of the more basic ones that basically calls for eliminating non-school property taxes for homestead properties. What's your take about what's going on here? Because the Senate, I don't think has done much at all about this going into the session. Yeah, from my understanding, the Senate doesn't really like the House proposals. While both chambers and the governor really do want to solve this issue of property taxes, which are, very, very expensive as of late, everyone wants to solve the issue, but no one really knows how. And so, like you said, the House has 8 proposals, 7 of which are, maybe constitutional amendments, but you're not seeing any companion resolutions or bills being filed in the Senate. And I think this is kind of a good example of where the Senate and the House stand with each other right now. The Senate President Ben Albritton, has been a little bit more aligned with Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis has been very not aligned with House Speaker Danny Perez. And so we're starting to see almost a little bit of a triangulation situation ahead of this session. And I'm expecting to see that throughout the session in terms of, yes, everyone wants to solve property taxes. The House has made some proposals. Senate doesn't look like they're going to take them up. The Senate, honestly, will probably make their own proposals that the governor endorses at some point soon. I don't know when. It's my thought on this. I'm writing a piece about DeSantis and the legislative session coming up. We've heard already earlier this week, right, that the governor says on congressional redistricting, another big ticket item, very sexy item, if you will, very scary item, Democrats believe, that he wants a special session on this. He's already announced in April. Yeah. Right. I believe that we might see property taxes delayed till there as well. It's not official, but the governor's hinted at that. I think that, these are such specific special issues that are so dear to his heart. He just wanted to have them deal with it separately. That has not, come about yet, but we'll wait and see on that. McKenna Schuler, back to you. You mentioned preemption.
Are there any bills that you're looking at? Because there always are. All right, the idea of Tallahassee taking power away from local governments is nothing new. It just keeps on happening every session, and it's really, the local governments hate this, Republicans, Democrats alike, because what is going on here? Let us do what we do best here locally. Tallahassee does not believe that. We've seen that in so many different issues in recent years. Some of it really egregious. Anything you're seeing that's been filed that stands out to you?
A couple of things. I reached out to advocacy organizations this week to kind of get their input on bills to watch. So a couple of preemption bills that have come up on my radar include HB 479 and SB 718, which would prevent local regulation of water quality and pollution control. So prohibiting local municipalities, including counties and cities, from adopting any local laws regulating water quality or pollution control. So there's that. I don't know how likely that is to get any sort of movement. But there's also another bill that would be building on a 2023 law that would allow businesses to block local laws they don't like, essentially. So this legislation would expand on a 2023 law that allows a person or business owner to sue a local government to stop a law or ordinance they deem, quote unquote, arbitrary or unreasonable from going into effect. So under the new proposal, it's my understanding that businesses would be able to sue over existing ordinances too.
Interesting. And also, you write a lot about labor, of course, and it seems like, I know 2023 was that big law in terms of stopping unions. Remind us of exactly what was that law in 2023.
SB 256.
Yeah, what did that do?
So that made it harder for public sector unions to continue to exist.
Like teacher unions.
Essentially. Yes, well, teacher unions were the target, but they haven't been the ones most affected. So who have been? Yeah, so I've been tracking the fallout of that law over the past couple of years, and the types of workers most affected have been blue-collar city and county workers. So I've tracked over 120 bargaining units or kind of smaller unions across the state that have been decertified or essentially dissolved as a result of this law. So that's affecting more than 69,000 public employees. It's hard to kind of get an accurate number because of paperwork and record keeping issues. But it's been, people who work in municipal services, so like trash collectors, bus drivers, have lost their union representation and the protections they had under their former contracts. So there's some unions that have reorganized, some that are still in the process, but the state agency that oversees all of that is also really kind of understaffed and doesn't have the resources they need to actually enforce this law. So they've been going to this legislature over the past couple of years to get more funding to enforce this, what critics call a union busting bill.
Absolutely. Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM, 19 minutes past the hour. You just heard from McKenna Schuler. She's a reporter with the Orlando Weekly. We're also speaking with Liv Caputo with the Florida Phoenix, my colleague from the Florida Phoenix, talking about the upcoming legislative session. And we talked about preemption bills. I want to, one of the big ones last year was Senate Bill 180. That was a bill that was sponsored by Pinellas County Republican Senator Nick DeSeglia, that blocks cities and counties from approving, quote, more restrictive or burdensome changes to growth plans. And joining us right now to talk about the reaction to that bill and other bills that her group is focused on over the next couple of months in Tallahassee is Kim Dinkins. Kim is the Policy and Planning Director with the Smart Growth Group 1000 Friends of Florida. Kim, good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Hey, great to have you here with us. So, Kim, before we talk about 2026 and what you're looking at there with the Florida 1000 Friends of Florida, let's talk about SB 180. That was the incredibly controversial bill. Your organization went to court about this, as did 25 other local governments, to try to block its implementation. That did not take hold. It's still very much in effect right now. To begin with, tell our listeners briefly about SB 180 and why your organization has been so opposed to it.
Yeah, thank you. So Senate Bill 180 was billed as the emergencies bill for 2025, and it was really intended to make sure that people who were trying to rebuild after the storms of 2024 weren't negatively impacted by new regulations that would prevent them from doing that. But what it ended up doing is there were two sections in the bill. One that basically said that a local government can't make any changes to their comprehensive plans, land development codes, or any policies that would be considered more restrictive or burdensome. And it didn't specify that they were just related to those storms or storm impacts. And then prospectively, another section in the bill said that anytime another storm comes through, any local government within 100 miles of where the storm hit would also not be able to create any or adopt any new comprehensive plan, land development code, or procedures that would be perceived as more restrictive or burdensome. And there was really no definition on what that more restrictive or burdensome meant.
Right. And so we've seen this play out in real time, right, with local governments. Stopping them from, in some cases, like I think was it Orlando, Orange County, that had a plan?
Yes.
Yeah. Talking about that?
So Orange County had a voter referendum where about 73% of voters voted to establish a rural boundary that would basically just require that if a development proposal came in within a rural area in Orange County, that in order to change the future land use for that, it would require a majority plus one vote of the county commissioners. And again, this was a legislative initiative, a ballot initiative that was passed by the voters. And essentially, the Department of Commerce came back and said that they couldn't implement that because it was more restrictive or burdensome. And so throughout the state, local governments that sometimes have been working on their comprehensive plans and development code improvements for years were told that they couldn't implement them based on the passage of Senate Bill 180.
Again, we're speaking with Kim Dinkins. She's the Policy and Planning Director with the Smart Growth Group 1000 Friends of Florida. So Nick DeSegli said he's heard the criticism and that he has this new bill now, SB 840, which he says will clarify and narrow the scope of SB 180. The new bill would shorten a ban on local governments creating more restrictive development rules and for future storms, and would prohibit cities and counties only from imposing tougher codes on storm damaged properties. I know there's a lot more to it. Kim, what is your organization's reaction to this filed bill?
Yeah, we're happy to see this bill filed, and we do believe that it addresses a lot of the concerns that we would have for the forward-looking provisions of SB 180, so for future storms. But it does still leave in limbo a lot of the questions from local governments who are now trying to pass those changes and are being told that they can't. So the bill addresses, again, some really great things. It, as you mentioned, limits the applicability of the bill, but it does still leave some question about what to do in areas like Orange County where they can't implement their rural boundary.
Another bill drawing concern is HB 299, known as the Blue Ribbon Projects Bill, sponsored by, I believe it's Republican Lauren Mello. It would allow massive developments of 10,000 acres or more to bypass local development rules in public hearings. If a development project met certain standards with the state, local officials would be required to approve it. What's your thoughts about this bill?
Yeah, this is basically like a city anywhere in the state could be approved just without any sort of public input or even input from local officials who would be impacted by the essentially a city. I mean, we're looking at areas that are 10,000 acres or more, as long as there's 60% of it is put into conservation, but really without a specific definition of what that conservation would be. And then up to 48,000 units on the remaining 4,000 acres. I mean, that's just a minimum. So really a very concerning set of bills that would just collapse the community planning process throughout the state.
Is there anything else that your group is focused on? I mean, I'm sure there is, but anything you want to tell us about that our listeners should be thinking about here as the session begins?
Yeah, I just wanted to say those were just a couple of the bills that are looking to circumvent local input and local elected official input. And so we're really focusing on these bills that would require administrative approval of developments and redefine, what exactly is infill. So yes, and we're also concerned about those bills that would allow additional lawsuits to be brought against local governments for decisions that they're legally allowed to make. So the previous speaker spoke about 105, House Bill 105, and that one is also on our radar.
Hey, Kim, let me ask you something. I think you have some connections to Ocala, and if you believe that U-Haul report that came out, they said Ocala is the fastest growing city in Florida. Are you still spending a lot of time there in Ocala and seeing some of that growth?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I try to stay pretty central. So the traffic is getting horrible. One thing to remember about a lot of these developments that we're seeing coming out of the ground is that many of them were approved back, almost 10 years ago in some cases. I know local governments around the state are dealing with development approvals that happened in the economic downturn. And so we're starting to see those come out of the ground.
Yeah,
now.
I guess I'm wondering because a lot of people, if there ever was a flyover kind of city in Florida, Ocala might be one of them, as beautiful as it is. But is there anything that larger metros can learn from the development? And is there anything Ocala's doing right or horribly wrong that maybe we can pick up here in the bigger cities when it comes to development?
Yeah, I would say that in areas like when Senate Bill 180 expires or gets changed, we have a farmland preservation area here in Marion County that has really, because of the commitment of our local government, been able to not see as much sprawl as it might have if that area hadn't been established. And I think it's similar to what Seminole County has already done with their rural boundary and what Orange County was trying to do with theirs. And so having clear definitions of where growth is intended to occur and where infrastructure is or will be is really important in making sure that we can address our development pressures as the state continues to grow.
All right, we'll leave it there. Kim Dinkins is the Policy and Planning Director with the Smart Growth Group 1000 Friends of Florida. Kim, great talking to you this morning. Thank you so much for joining us.
You too. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on now to another issue. And by the way, we still are with McKenna Schuler and Liv Caputo talking about the legislature, but we're going to get into one other specific bill before we just broaden the conversation, and do want to bring our listeners in. Let me just throw the phone number out right now, 813-239-9663. Okay, so let's talk about driving while texting, or go beyond that, right? So Florida does have a bill, Ray, and it took a while, by the way. We were one of the later states to do this, to have a bill banning texting while driving. Okay, but other states have gone beyond that, because distracting driving is a huge issue, as we all know. And the next step is to have what they call hands-free legislation, where basically through Bluetooth, okay, you can still talk on your cell phone, but just not manipulating the phone itself, okay? So I believe 31 other states have this in the United States, but not in Florida, not yet anyway. So our next guest here joining us via Zoom is one of the most active advocates in Florida to try to get a hands-free bill passed, and that's Demetrius Branca, who joins us from Tallahassee. Demetrius, good morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Great to have you here with us, Demetrius. Demetrius is the president of the Anthony Phoenix Branca Foundation, which is dedicated to raising awareness on the consequences of distracted driving. And of course, I've written several articles about you, Demetrius, because you have been a one-man passion band here, as it were, going around the state the last few years, trying to get states Florida to strengthen their laws about this. Before we talk about that, let's talk about you, how this is such a personal thing for you. Tragically, your 19-year-old son, Anthony, died in 2014 when a distracted driver hit him as he was riding his motorcycle to classes as what's known as Tallahassee State College. I know that was devastating to you and your family, and you've worked tirelessly now over the last, I guess that happened over a decade ago, working with lawmakers to get them to change this law. Tell us why this is such an important bill that we should have passed in the state of Florida.
Well, thanks, Mitch. Thanks for having me. First of all, let me say that I'm not a one-man show. I have a couple of really good friends that are helping me get this message out. And the message is that we have to focus on safety. We have to focus on making sure that people can get from where they are to where they need to go safely. And right now, the state of Florida is not doing that. The current law has been described by one sheriff that I heard talk about, and you probably would know his name if you heard it. He called it as useless as memories on a boar hog. And that's exactly what the current law is. It's unenforceable. The law enforcement fellas and ladies out there, they have a very difficult time determining whether the driver is manipulating their phone. And things that are not on the table as far as what they can get pulled over for are like scrolling through social media, doing your Amazon shopping, watching videos, doing FaceTime. Those things are all still legal, but they're deadly, and it's happening all over the state. And as a matter of fact, Tampa area is home to some of the deadliest stretches of highways in the country. And so we need to do something about this. And the best way to do this is to get people off their phones and focus on driving. And 33 other states have done this, not to mention it's all across Europe and every military installation, because it's the common sense thing to do. And it's been a struggle in Florida trying to get this law passed.
It really has been. I saw you, though, and you're right, absolutely. There's other organizations who are working on this as well. But I've seen you personally lobby people like Senator DeSegli, who we mentioned a moment ago. You actually got him to, I saw, was it last year or 2 years ago, when Pinellas County had a legislative delegation meeting, and you called him out in front of everybody. I know he didn't appreciate it, but then you spoke to him afterwards, and he came around, and he ended up, I believe, sponsoring the version of this bill last year.
Well, he didn't quite sponsor it, but he did come around, and in one of the committee meetings about that bill, he said this was good policy, and that's a 180-degree turn. And it's because I was able to speak to him on a personal, like on a parent level, because I talked about my son, and I know that he has a son, and we were able to bridge that divide, and he was able to see why I am so passionate about this, because it is 100% absolutely unfair that Anthony is not with us today. Anthony was a light in this world. He's like I've had dozen people come up to me since his death and say he was their best friend. It's 100% absolutely unfair. And it's unfair because Anthony was doing everything right. He was a good person. He was a hard worker. He was just on his way on a Friday afternoon from his early morning bagel shop job to classes at TCC on a Friday afternoon. And this other person who was not paying attention to the one thing that they needed to be paying attention to just killed him. And so when I was able to relay that story to Senator DeSegli on a personal level and have him put his son's face in the place of my son, it was quick. It was quick. It was like almost instantaneous. You know, it started off a little bit heated, but the moment that came into his mind, his tone softened and he saw why I'm so passionate about this. And that was actually just about a year ago. I want to say it might have been almost exactly a year ago that delegation meeting was.
Right. Again, I want to tell our listeners, if you're just tuning in right now, you listen to Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM, 33 minutes after the hour. Mitch Perry with Ray Roa. We're talking about the upcoming legislative session and looking at specific bills here that are coming up, including in the case of hands-free driving bill, Senate Bill 1152, which was just filed this week by Vero Beach Republican Senator Aaron Grawl. This would expand the Sunshine State's ban on texting while driving to cover holding or, quote, supporting a handheld device while on the road. That means drivers will not be able to make calls from their phone, hold it, or even rest it on their laps if the bill becomes law. If passed, it would take effect in October. The bill reads, handheld manner means holding a wireless communications device in one or both hands or physically supporting the device with any other part of the body. This could include cell phones to laptops to gaming devices. You mentioned, let's talk about this, Demetrius. And I watched, Senator Grawl file the bill last year. It passed in the Senate last year, didn't go anywhere in the House, whereas the year before it was vice versa. There were some interesting arguments made in the Senate about this last year against the bill. I think Tom Leek, Jonathan Martin, Jonathan Martin was talking about how he sees people with he wants to call the auto industry and remove all these kind of video things that they have up there. So it's like, to him, it was like, oh, if we just do this thing with the phones, that's not enough. And so therefore he couldn't go with it. I heard some other things that were really interesting, let's just say, in terms of arguments. I get it, where some people are addicted to doing this, and some people think it's because some of these lawmakers drive hours to go up from their home districts to Tallahassee, and they're on their phones while they're driving, and they don't want to stop them doing that. That's part of the argument that they don't say publicly, but they feel. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's kind of what's happening. I mean, I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but I just think that. And to be honest, I have heard through, people that I know in the legislature that some of the people that have stood against this are the people who are emailing on their way back and forth from Tallahassee. And they have said that if they don't want to force other people to do something that they're not willing to do. And that to me is the ultimate in selfishness. Like, this is literally allowing people to get run over, bicyclists, pedestrians, people at red lights and stop signs getting killed because these legislators want to read their email. Give me a break. Why are they even in Tallahassee? Why did they run for office if, well, maybe that's the answer. Maybe they're just in it for themselves. I cannot fathom it. And it blows my mind that is the obstacles. And to Senator Leak, his argument at that committee meeting was, well, if I can't drive while I'm holding my phone and I just want to drive while I am holding my phone, to me, what is he saying? Is this about him? No, it's not about him. Not to mention the fact that we have drunk driving laws. Can you drive while holding an open beer? His argument was we shouldn't take things that are legal and make them illegal. Well, context is everything, Senator Leak. Context is everything. You can't hold a beer or a bottle of wine while you're driving. Why should you be able to hold a cell phone? It's about saving lives. We have to come together around a common cause like life and pursuit of happiness. And to me, what they're coming around is themselves. Like Senator Leak's, his argument is purely selfish and self-centered, and I just can't get behind that. And I don't think that the people of Florida agree, because in poll after poll, 80% of people want stricter distracted driving laws. And so we're going to bow down to Senator Leak because he doesn't like the way he feels, because the government shouldn't be telling him to do something that's dangerous. I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. Demetrius Branca, he's an advocate for, again, hands-free driving bill, and is the president of the Anthony Phoenix Branca Foundation, which is dedicated to raising awareness on the consequences of distracted driving. I'm sure we'll see you up there in Tallahassee beginning next week. Demetrius, thank you so much for your time this morning.
You got it, Mitch. I appreciate you. Have a great day. And to all the people out there, just drive safe, people. Get yourselves home to your families safe and sound. That's what we all want.
All right. Thank you so much, Demetrius. So, Ray Roa, interesting, I don't know if you saw my story I wrote before the Christmas about biking.
I did.
The dangers of biking in Florida. And, no surprise, we're
the old 3-foot rule.
Yeah, the 3-foot rule. Not to be confused with the 6-foot rule.
Yeah, that's Tampa.
Yeah. But anyway, one of the reasons I asked one of the advocates of why is Florida continuing to be the most dangerous state in the country for cyclists, also pedestrians by statistics, and he mentions distracted driving. And that makes sense, sadly. And so it's interesting, but the bill has moved, but it hasn't moved completely. Like 2 years ago, the House passed it, the Senate didn't touch it. Last year, the Senate passed it, the House didn't touch it. It's really weird, and that's the way Tallahassee works.
Yeah,
it's
fascinating to hear Demetrius talk about his exchange with DeSigley and being able to change the mind of somebody. And then as he was saying that, I was wondering what it's like to talk with somebody whose mind he can't change, and then he went very much into that. And it kind of speaks, I think, to some frustrations. You have a guy like him showing up all the time. I mean, we see it in the public comment in Tallahassee all the time. And you stand there on the, and it's sometimes it seems like they're not getting heard, but it is kind of inspiring to hear him,
And let me bring broaden the conversation and bring Liv back in here because, this show is for our listeners. And, some of our listeners are going to go up to Tallahassee, right?
Yeah. So many of our listeners are those people who are working for a cause.
And they're going to, or they're just regular, they're not maybe not even working for it. They believe passionately in an issue one way for or against, and they're going to drive up there, maybe from Tampa, maybe from Miami, 8-hour drive. And Liv, what you've seen this, right? Covering the legislature the last few years. The legislature, I guess, they ideally would give 3 minutes to somebody to speak, but sometimes it doesn't work out like that.
No, oftentimes it does not work out that way, especially with some of the more controversial bills we've seen, especially since 2022, 2023, especially. You saw a lot of really controversial bills that were upsetting a lot of people. I mean, there would be days where, for example, in 2023, when the 6-week abortion ban was being discussed, I remember it was just one of the committee meetings that was the only bill on the agenda. And I think it was 8 hours that people were there talking for public comment, for everything, just debate. Sometimes they have to limit public comment to 30 seconds, I've seen before. And we're probably going to have, I would assume, some similar situations coming up this session. There's some bills that are looking really controversial that people are already voicing opposition to. Off the top of my mind, there's 2 bills that would that deal with Charlie Kirk and naming things after Charlie Kirk, and people have already been really oppositional to that. So that's just one that I can think of. But
you're right. That's going to be hot and heavy. I think Kevin Steele was sponsoring that in the House, the Pasco County Republican running for CFO. Again, want to tell our listeners we've got about 20 minutes or so here. I want to open up the phones or to write to us. We've got somebody who wrote in and said, like, talking about the distracted drivers bill. He says, does that mean you won't be able to eat fast food in your car? I see people.
I think you still do that.
Cheeseburgers and milkshakes and everything else that's distracting them. That's a great point. Liv, do you know? I know you wrote about the bill this week. Is that? I don't know if it references food. Actually,
from my understanding, it's only related to wireless communication devices. So as long as you're not eating like a Wi-Fi router, you should be fine.
Right. You can do your makeup still, other things that people do, shave, I guess. We've seen it all. You drive up to, I-75 to the Capitol.
Yeah, it's pretty much the scariest thing, driving on the highway and seeing what people are doing, because you're looking around too, So,
right. We do have a couple callers here.
The
So
phones
let's
are
go
going
that.
here.
Let's brave our, and again,
Chris in Clearwater.
anybody wants to talk about what's going on in Tallahassee, something that our guests have talked about, or something else that you are familiar with that you'd like us to know about, and tell us, because we'll be all covering this the next couple of months here, and there's so many bills you just can't know all of them going into it, and then it's a very intense situation. I kind of dig it as a reporter, but it is crazy. Okay, DeAndre from Brandon. DeAndre, you're on the air.
Good morning. Yeah, I've noticed that intersections visibility is a very bad problem all over the county, and I understand Hillsborough maybe consider that when it was looking for, street tax money and all that kind of thing. And I just want to kind of like mention that, to keep in consideration, but also in concern for the gentleman and his loss. But I'm curious as well how the police union is doing under all this activity when it comes to that bill. Anyway, I'll take my answer.
That's a good one for McKenna there. What is the police union relationship, and how are they affected by some of these so-called anti-union laws?
Thank you, Yandra.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be surprised if they're in favor of this handless driving bill. I mean, anything that kind of gives them something to do in terms of enforcement.
Right, because it is tough, right? I mean, people have argued that the law we have now. So we have a law now that basically, stops. You're not allowed to text and drive, and we know people do it. Okay, we know people do it because it's. And I know there was concerns from some of the black lawmakers. They thought that this would be an attempt to pull over people, indiscriminately.
Not even anything. I mean, you talked about, not to get too far off the subject, but the proposed bill that would make carrying medical marijuana in your car.
Oh, that's another
illegal,
proposed.
And then, a cop being able to
kind of an open container type of thing.
So all these interactions with police, over and over again, is that great for the community?
Right. That bill you're talking about, Ray. Right. That is basically you can be a medical marijuana patient, which, by the way, doesn't absolve you of a lot of things in Florida. If you're you can lose your job, obviously, if they drug test you when you're a medical marijuana patient here. Other states don't have that law. But, right, I believe the new law, I haven't read it or wrote about it, but it's kind of an open container kind of thing where, like, if you have an open package of cannabis,
I think Sexton had that byline for you guys. So
Christine wrote about it, right? But yeah, I think I've seen people talk about it being roughly the equivalent of like an open container situation, whereas you can have alcohol in your car, but it can't be open. Same thing with cannabis; you can have it in a package, you can't have it opened up. What have you.
Liv, let me ask you something, like, just thinking about everything that's happened with ICE, over the last week. And I think over the last couple of sessions, we've maybe seen some of these cultural hot button things kind of cool off in the session, but they don't really go away. I know Representative Angie Nixon has a bill that would order ICE officers to ID themselves and ban face masks in public. How much do you think these kind of lightning rod hot button things will be on the top of people's minds in Tallahassee over the session? And will they distract from the other things that lawmakers have to do?
I think for this session, of course, the hot button issues always take the most, attention, most time. Immigration really is going to be one, to your point. These past few years, it's become a massive, massive talking point, and especially since President Trump has taken office, we're really seeing immigration. There's, as far as the Democrats' proposed legislation, it's a GOP supermajority. Yes, Angie Nixon has filed a bill that would do that. It's likely not going to get, if it gets scheduled, there's not going to be much further it's going to get. As far as taking away from other issues, yeah, probably. I mean, the bigger issue, though, I think that lawmakers are going to run into this session is just no one is on the same page in the chambers. So, as far as important legislation getting through or hot button legislation getting through, it's going to be a battle. No matter, unless the topic is really uncontroversial, it's going to be a little bit difficult for state lawmakers to get most things across the finish line.
Again, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Skinny. It's 11:45. We're here in the last 15 minutes here. Ray Roa, Mitch Perry. We've got McKenna Schuler with Caputo via Zoom. And welcome your phone calls. And we've got Molly calling in from Tampa. Wants to talk about something, I think, coming on with the legislative session. Good morning, Molly.
Hi there. I had a question about the texting and driving. I thought that when that law was initially adopted, the only way you could get a ticket for texting and driving was if you had another infraction.
Right, secondary.
Or were pulled over for another infraction. Yeah. And is that still going to be in place? Because if it is, then it's all this discussion to me, in my opinion, it's worthless. You know, unless a police officer, if they're seeing somebody distracted in driving, if they don't have the ability to pull them over immediately.
That's an excellent point, Molly. And you're right in terms of the bill that we have on the books right now. I believe that it makes it a secondary offense, but I could be wrong about that. But I would say this, and I don't know if you can weigh in. I know you wrote about it this week, but it's going to be easier certainly for a law officer to see if somebody has a phone to their hand versus. If they're talking, right? Because a hands-free bill means you can't forget about texting. It means to be talking literally. I know this is the case, in California. I'll tell you this, in California where I was there just for Christmas, and they've had this hands-free law in place for years, and you do not see people, I don't anyway, to the extent that I'm looking at other motorists, with the hand, everybody's got a Bluetooth basically, so it's pretty efficient that way. But excellent point, because you're right, if it's not primary, if it's secondary, then this stuff will continue to go on. And I don't think that is the intent, certainly, of Senator Aaron Grahl in filing that. But we'll check on that, definitely. Thank you for that, Molly. Thank you. I don't know, Liv, do you know for sure that's primary, secondary in terms of the new legislation?
I don't know for sure. I do know, though, that the bill language appears to adopt most of the same statute from the texting while driving law. So I would assume, this is an assumption, I don't know for sure.
I know.
It would apply in the same way. Though, even though it's secondary, I know that's what's in law. I don't know if that's so much in practice in terms of the way officers are behaving. But.
Yeah, and because it'd be interesting to see how many, if we actually, asked, I don't know where we'd go through the Highway Patrol or Department of Transportation, how many arrests or citations, not really arrests, but citations they make on that currently. Okay, Chris from Clearwater has been patiently holding on. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning. I wanted to encourage folks to tell the legislators in Tallahassee to support Senate Bill 188 and the companion bill, HB 819, that would require medical examiners to review and document the deceased child's immunization and medical records and report all vaccines or emergency countermeasures that were administered 90 days before the death to the CDC's databases, sudden and unexpected infant death and sudden death in the young case registry. Hopefully we can get better population-wide data, because the CDC's vaccine monitoring system, VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, is voluntary, and it should require, it should be changed. We should federally change that to require mandatory reporting by physicians, of adverse effects, including death. And before the CDC recommended childhood vaccine schedule was just changed, the 20 of the vaccine inserts say that the vaccine causes encephalitis, which is brain swelling, which is often a trigger for neurological conditions like autism or possibly death.
Right. Okay, Chris, thank you very much. It brings up a point, though. Okay, so another thing that Governor DeSantis, or not another thing, but a thing that Governor DeSantis wants to have happen this session that may very well not happen, and that is to end the vaccine vaccinations
mandates.
Mandate. Thank you so much. Ban vaccine mandates. Okay, so we know that Joseph Ladapo, Surgeon General with DeSantis, there was a press conference in Valrico in early September when they made this big news that they were hoping to get rid of this. And I believe there's 11 specific vaccines. 4 of them, I believe, roughly are only through rule changing you can change, and they are in the process of doing that. However, there's 7 other vaccines that they need legislative approval for. And anybody weigh in here? I don't believe there's been any bill filed on that as we go into this afternoon.
Yeah, I'm not completely sure. I feel like I've seen a couple of vaccine related.
Like he's talking about, like Chris was rocking, that is definitely vaccine related. But in terms of what Ladapo wants to do, I don't. And there might be. I mean, again, there's tons being filed this last week.
Definitely haven't seen any movement, I don't think, in committees, which...
no, not in committees at all.
Yeah.
And that's big because, again, I'm writing this piece about, like, DeSantis, what he wants out of this session. And that is something, that is one of the very specific wants. Like Liv mentioned, the AI Bill of Rights. He wants that. He wants, property taxes. He wants, redistricting. But he wants the ban the vaccine mandates. And the legislature, who finally, the House anyway, showed some backbone last year and didn't go with everything he wants to do. I don't know if that's going to happen. We'll have to wait and see on that.
Let me ask you this: how much do you think we'll be able to not talk about the governor's race here in the next 2 months? Can we get?
Is there even a race going on?
And stay away from
so you're in
headlines
Orange County.
about that?
You're in Orlando.
Yeah, you have Demings in there.
You have Jerry Demings, who, by the way, he announced in November he's running against David Jolly for the Democratic nomination. But nobody's really heard much from since. I know it's been the holidays and all that, but and it's early, relatively speaking. What's your thoughts about Jerry Demings as a Democratic candidate?
Yeah, no, I mean, I actually haven't heard from him or his campaign that much either over the past couple of weeks. I guess, holidays, but it's hard to it's hard to gauge sort of the interest for Jolly versus
well, we ask you this, though. You covered Demings, obviously, in your last few years covering reporting in Orlando. We don't know much about Jerry Demings. We certainly know a lot about David Jolly, being from the Bay Area here. We interviewed him. We actually had him on the Skinny back in November when he announced himself. And I guess he made, to me, he came on my radar when he pushed back against DeSantis or Nuthmeier when they were threatening to remove everybody from the Orange County Commission because of an immigration issue. Again, the politics of bullyism, as some would say, basically. So that was impressive. That kind of showed some people he's got some moxie here. But he had to still, by the way,
he eventually
capitulate.
Retreated.
Yes.
I will say too, one thing that I have noticed was immigration rights advocates have continued to come to county meetings, and he has still kind of, since filing for governor, he's kind of reiterated sort of the excuse in terms of bolstering the rights of immigrants who are detained in the local jail, just that, there's nothing that we can do as a county. It's up to the state. And so just kind of remaining neutral, which has been kind of an interesting shift to watch from him standing up to kind of now backing off a little bit.
Yeah, and we know, of course, the counties, they all have this the 287G agreements, which the legislature passed last year, forcing them to work on immigration issues. Liv Caputo, Ray just mentioned this about the governor's race. I wrote a story this morning about Fabrizio and Associates poll that shows Byron Donalds again just absolutely dominating in the GOP race for governor. We know he's raised over $40 million. I mean, it's only the first week of the year, and it seems like this governor's race is already over. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's really tempting to say that, right? Especially considering the massive amount of voters Republicans have in the state of Florida, that it kind of looks like who the Republican nominee is going to be who the governor is, right? And that's kind of where we're at. In terms of Byron Donalds, I think he's at 46 million he's raised in already, and this is just for a primary. He's raked in so much money. It's mind-blowing. It's tempting to say, governor's race is a done deal right now. Though, to be fair, we do have 6 months, I think.
Till August, actually.
Yeah, and in Florida, and in 6 months, God knows what can happen at this point.
It's like 3 lifetimes.
Yeah, exactly. And we have a few other maybe candidates on the Republican side. You have the former House Speaker Paul Renner, who's really stuck by.
He announced, by the way, he raised like over $4 million, which is impressive in the last quarter.
Yeah. No, he's definitely raised a lot, and really stuck by DeSantis's agenda. He continues to do that despite the governor saying him getting into the race was an ill-advised decision. Renner's not fazed, or at least doesn't appear to be fazed by that. Then you have the other announced candidate is James Fishback, who's kind of appearing as this, alternative right candidate, right as in right-wing candidate on social media, who's really starting to move up slightly in the polls. Nowhere near where Donald's is, but it is interesting to see that movement. And then Jay Collins, who knows what's going on with that? But
who does know what's
going
on with Jay Collins?
Knows what's going on with that.
I don't think so either. And he's been, kind of threatening to announce for months at this point that now it's a kind of up in the air situation. But to answer your question,
well, I think you wrote this right. You were at the event in Sanderson with the Deportation Depot presser, and you put a photo out about Jay Collins is here, right?
Or is not here.
He was not there. That's right. I'm sorry. He wasn't there.
Yeah.
Everybody else was there, but he wasn't there. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, that was interesting too, because there's been kind of whispers on the Republican side, right, of maybe some discord between DeSantis and Collins, where Collins was going to announce for a while. And then from what I've been hearing personally is DeSantis was kind of backing Collins, but being like, listen, you gotta prove that you earn it. You gotta earn it. Right. And then Collins, that money wasn't coming in for Collins.
Right.
And so DeSantis is kind of standing there like, I don't know if I am going to endorse. And now Collins is in this weird limbo of like, do I announce? Do I not? What do I do? But as time ticks on, this indecision is really starting to get to Republican voters who you're even seeing on social media are like, who are all in on Collins are now like, all right, well, maybe we'll go for Fishback. Maybe we'll go for Donald.
They want an alternative. It's maybe a minority in the Republican ranks of somebody who wants to vote for somebody other than Byron Donalds, but and that includes, by the way, Ron DeSantis. And yet they can't figure out Ron DeSantis. Who was going to back. I should say that Jay Collins actually was at the event I covered on this week when DeSantis was at Anna Paulina Luna in Clearwater. That's I was getting confused. Yeah, he wasn't at the event that you covered. He was at the event I was, and that was like a Jay Collins spotting. That was a big thing there. So McKenna, we just got another couple minutes left to go. Anything else you want to say about what's coming up in the session here that you're looking at here?
Well, one thing, I don't know if this is actually going to advance or not, but I feel like it's worth putting on people's radars that's kind of interesting is one labor bill that is actually sponsored by a Republican and a Democrat, and it was pushed by this worker center labor rights organization in South Florida, Beyond the Bars, which advocates for incarcerated and formerly incarcerated workers. And they helped work on some legislation that just got filed to basically beef up worker protections for temp and day labor workers. So that's been filed, and it would be interesting to kind of see that move. But in terms of things that I think are more likely to move, there's also some bills affecting reproductive health care rights. So there's one, actually, I think that's actually made it to a full House vote. Let me just find that. That is... critics have described it as basically giving fetuses some of the same legal rights as children. So that's HB 289, sponsored by Senator Aaron Grawl and Representative Sam Greco. So the legislation would give fetuses and embryos some of the same legal rights as human children by allowing parents to sue for damages over the wrongful death of a quote-unquote unborn child. So that's already cleared. It's 2 or 3 committees. And
okay,
now up for
thank
the
you
House.
for that, McKenna Schuler. Also, Ray, before we go, I did bring up. So, what are you doing tonight, though? So now we're okay.
So by the way, that voice was McKenna Schuler, staff writer at Orlando Weekly. Liv Caputo was with us.
Liv,
for this
thank
hour.
you so much.
Thank you so much for being here from the Florida Phoenix, and obviously Kim from 1,000 Friends of Florida, Demetrius, to talk about hands-free driving. Yeah, and tonight I'm gonna tell a few stories at this comedy theater called the Commodore. It's based on improv. Yeah. So there's these little short interviews, 5 to 7 minutes, and then improv actors will take whatever I say and turn them into scenes. I'm pretty much terrified. But yeah, they said it's a great interview. So
I went to an event like a couple months ago at the Commodore.
Yeah, they've had some great people. I mean,
city great improv actors.
So the late Andy Hughes was a Salute and Happy Days person, right. And the improv is this terrifying thing where like you don't know what the actors are going to do. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting.
So
tonight 7 p.m. The Commodore. We have a little post there on cltampa.com. And yeah, it should be interesting. So
okay, well, this is the last time I'll see you in person for a while.
Yeah, we're gonna be flying solo here, but we're gonna check in with you as much as we can, get an update from you, a wellness report, and blink twice if you're okay. So big thanks to you and Liv for being up there and covering that for all of us down here. The State's Newsroom does such a good job, and thank you, McKenna, for keeping an eye on everything. We didn't get to ask you if any more Starbucks are going to close because of strikes, but maybe that's another show. On behalf of myself, Ray Roa, Skip Sassy on the boards, Anthony Mador on the phones. Thank you so much, my colleague Mitch Perry. Godspeed to you. The longest drive in Florida all the way up to Tallahassee. Joellen Schilke is in Studio One with Art in Your Ear. I think she wants me to come over there, so we'll talk to you over there. Thanks for supporting WMNF Tampa.